I'm Walt Wheeler, Executive Director of the Michigan Masonic Charitable Foundation, and we're here today recording another in our series of interviews of past Grand Masters. With us today is Most Worshipful Brother Richard P. Ruhland, who served as Grand Master in the years 2005 and 2006. Rick, thank you for being with us today.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for the invite.
We're going to start at the very beginning. Tell us where you were born.
The very beginning. Well, okay. That was in Denver, Colorado. September 29th in the 1900s. 1950 to be exact. Denver, Colorado. 1950, September 29th.
And how long did you live there?
Well, I tell people that I was born and raised there. For the most part, we did live there. I went through all my grade school years. I lived for a short period of time during the 6th grade in Syracuse, New York. My dad was sent there to get his master's degree at Syracuse University. So we went there for 13 months or whatever through the 6th grade. Then we moved back, and I was in Denver through my junior year in high school. And my dad was transferred again. I'll tell you about that. He was transferred again, so we moved to New Jersey over Thanksgiving. Went into a new high school at Thanksgiving break. You can imagine how that is as a junior in high school. And then my parents were having a house built. At the end of that year, we moved again in New Jersey, and I finished my high school days in New Jersey. Graduated from high school at Randolph High School in New Jersey. So that takes me that far.
Okay.
So we can back up if you
Well,
want.
let's back up and tell me a little bit about your mom and dad.
Oh, okay. Well, my mom, Pat, her name is Pat also, Patricia. Her father was in the Air Force, so they moved around a little bit, but they lived mostly in South Dakota. She was born in South Dakota. And then my grandfather, George O'Neill, was then transferred to Denver, where my mom and dad met when she was finishing up her high school. So she moved different high schools as well during her. My dad was born and raised in Denver, Denver boy. His name is also Richard. And there's a little history there as well, but he was born and raised in Denver, graduated and went through college at the University of Denver there. And that's where they got married before they finished college, but they got married in Denver. The firstborn son in our family is Richard. So my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my dad, myself are all Richards. And then I have a son, and his name is Richard. So we've carried on that tradition.
Really?
But it was basically Denver was kind of our hometown.
What did Dad do for a living?
Well, he worked for the Department of the Army. When he came out of the Army in 1946, just after the war, he was in accounting, so they kept him on. He was an accountant. Became the comptroller at the Rocky Mountain Arsenal in Denver, Colorado. He was subsequently transferred to New Jersey to work at their munitions command for the Department of the Army. He wasn't in the military, but he just worked for the Department of the Army. Transferred there as their comptroller. Then he was transferred here and became the comptroller at the Tank Automotive Command here in Detroit for a while, a couple of years. And then he was transferred to Washington, D.C., where he became the comptroller for the Department of the Army. In Washington, D.C., they actually lived in Virginia, but nobody lives in D.C., basically. But he was the comptroller of the Department of the Army when he died in 1977. So that's kind of why we moved around a little bit, is because his job transfers.
I know you had some siblings. Tell me about your siblings.
I do, thanks. Well, I have a sister. I used to call her my older sister, but then she said, you never use the word old to a lady. So she's not my big sister either. You don't use old, you don't use big. Anyway, she was born before I was. Her name is Kathy. And she's 2 years older than me. And then I have a sister named Carrie. She's 1 year older. So I had two older sisters. Oh, I did it again. Two older sisters. And then I have a younger brother. He's 8 years younger than I am. Yeah. His name is Rob. And right now, Carrie lives in Arizona. Rob lives in Arizona. Kathy lives in Florida. We kind of just spread out all over the country. And I'm here. So Kathy, Carrie, Rob, and myself, the 4 kids.
Well, at least you got nice places to go visit.
Yeah, I do, for sure.
So tell me about some childhood memories. What sticks out in your mind in your childhood growing up?
Oh, 2 older sisters, I was always the brunt of everything. It was always Ricky did it, Ricky did it, Ricky did it. And I would get in trouble because Ricky did it. But I'll tell you a cute little story. As I said, my father worked for the Department of the Army, and he had a very high position. So we would go on Sundays to the officers' club and have dinner at the officers' club. And my parents did really well teaching us the proper manners and things like this. All of us kids, we knew how to act in public as kids. And I was I don't know how old I was, maybe I was 4 or something like that. I always used to ask my dad what he did for a living. And he told me that he was chief of the janitors. So he'd tell me, and he never would really tell me, what the heck he did. So he said he was chief of the janitors. So here I am at the officers' club, and all these 4-star generals sitting around the table that actually worked for my dad. And I had this general sitting next to me, my dad's on the other side of me, and I'm talking to this general, and he says to me, yeah, I work for your dad. And I looked at him and I said, well, then you must be a janitor. And this 4-star general kind of looked around the room, burst out laughing. Everybody burst out laughing. Well, my dad's face got real red because then he had to explain why I thought this 4-star general was a janitor, So out of the mouths of babes. But that's one of my dearest memories of being out at this officers club with my mom and dad. So I was quite young. We got tons of others, but we don't have much tape.
So you mentioned a little bit that you moved around a lot. Tell us some of the schools that you went to.
Okay, well, my high school in Denver was Arapahoe High School. It was a new high school. I would have been the 3rd graduating class in that high school. I think there were only like 600 students, but still a fairly large high school. It's located in Littleton, Colorado, so it was on that side, on the south side of Denver proper. So I went from Arapahoe High School. I went to Morristown High School in New Jersey. Went there a half a year, Morristown High School. We lived in a neat little community around a lake. It was called White Meadow Lake. And we were there in the wintertime, so we did a lot of ice skating and ice boating. I built myself an ice boat. And it was really cool because it took me across the lake lickety-split, but walking all the way across the lake back home again, that wasn't so good. So I had to figure out a way to learn how to tack, when you're just a kid. Anyway, so Morristown High School for my junior year, and then I graduated. We moved to Randolph, the community of Randolph, and I graduated from Randolph High School. The very day after graduation, we moved. And I'm driving to Detroit with my dad. We're driving all the cars, with the girls and mom and dad and everything. I'm driving, and I said, what are you doing, running from bill collectors or something? What the heck? Well, the very day after graduation, but he'd already had a job here. I was just kidding around with him. So got here, started working, different careers and stuff like that, and that's my schools.
Okay, so
high schools.
When you got back to Michigan, you went to college?
I did. Well, I started out at Oakland Community College over in Orchard Ridge campus. Later finished with the University of Phoenix with a Bachelor of Science Degree in business.
Okay. Any particular studies that you enjoyed?
Well, I liked history a lot, and I had once even thought about doing something along that line. Civil War, I was just very, very enthused about the Civil War aspect and history and stuff like that. So I thought maybe I'd do that. Had a lot of trouble with algebra, so needed a lot of help there. I got through it, but history was pretty cool.
So let's talk about your working career. What was your very first job?
Well, I wanted a motorcycle. I wanted to buy a motorcycle. And my dad said that he would pay for half of it if I could pay for half. So my buddies worked at a pancake house. Actually, it was International House of Pancakes. And I was only 14, so that's right on the edge where you can get a job. So I went to this pancake house where my buddies worked, and the manager's name was Joe, big old burly guy, an old guy. It's Old Joe, they called him. And I applied for a job as a dishwasher. He said he didn't have any openings. Okay. So I went home. I came back the very next day, talked to Old Joe. Got any openings, Joe? No openings. I left. I came back again and again and every single day until finally the guy says, I got to hire you just to get rid of you. So they hired me as a busboy at International House of Pancakes. Earned enough money to buy my little motorcycle. And in Colorado, we never put them away for the winter. We'd ride them all winter long. So I had a little 50, what was it, a Bridgestone 50. And I'd ride it into work, and I'd get into work, and my hands and everything would be frozen from the snow. We wore helmets, of course, but be frozen. My knees would be frozen. I'd have to thaw out the work. Then I'd have to brush it off to ride it home in the snow. Yeah. So I was fortunate that nothing ever happened, but we rode them all the time. So that was my first job, and basically stayed in the restaurant business through a lot of my schooling, career, stuff like that. It's a good job for kids and stuff like that, but stayed in the restaurant business in New Jersey as well, and then here as well, stayed in the restaurant business. Worked at the International House of Pancakes down on Woodward in Birmingham. Transitioned out of there to a cook's job. Yeah, I was still washing dishes back then. So then I got a raise. I went to a cook. You know, I was cooking. Worked for a company called the Maple House. It was a small franchise. I think they only had 2 locations in town at the time. But I was cooking for them. Then they had a location in Northville. I became a manager for them at their locations there. And then I started managing a job named Zukin's Rib Shack. Went from the Maple House to a Rib Shack. Got tired of pancakes. Started to put some meat on my bones. So went to them. And then I got a job with Ponderosa. Now, they're still a big chain around nowadays. But in the Detroit area, it was a franchise. He had 8 units in here. And was managing for them. 1 at the Northland facility. And then 1 in Dearborn. Opened it for them. And that took me up to the end of my restaurant career.
So did you go from there to your career at General Motors?
I did. It was fairly soon after Pat and I got married, and then we had our first child, Jessica. And it was kind of funny because in the restaurant business, it's funny. You won't starve to death, but you will work yourself to death unless you are the owner. If you are a worker, manager, whatever, you're going to work a lot of long hours. You work a lot of holidays. Like I said, you won't starve because they'll feed you, but you work a lot of long hours. And I did.
I can tell you it's no different if you're the owner.
It's even worse if you're the owner. We'll get to that too. But home from work after working 10, 12 hours, and Jessica was in her crib, sleeping. And I just thought, I'm missing my daughter growing up. Now, my father-in-law, Earl Cusac, he worked for General Motors. And he had asked me a couple of times, he says, you need to come on out to the plant and take a look at the plant and see if maybe we could fit you in somewhere. And I always had this mentality that I didn't want to be a quote-unquote factory rat, So I said no. I always said no. I didn't want to do that. I'm good here. Well, when I finally got some light in my life and my little daughter, I started to think differently. So he said, come on out, I'll just give you a tour. We'll take a tour of the plant. Now, this was the Willow Run, General Motors Willow Run plant. They built transmissions. So he was an engineer out there, so he took me on a tour. And we went out through the building, he's showing me all the stuff, and it's just this huge, massive plant, nothing like I'd ever seen before. Machines that were bigger than a 4-story house. It was just immense. So anyway, we walk across this catwalk, and we're looking at all these people in the assembly portion working. And he says to me, he sees this guy down there, and he's pushing a broom, sweeping the floor. And he says, see that guy down there pushing that broom? I said, yeah. He says, he makes $25 an hour. I said, what? And he says, oh, and guess what? If he works Saturday, he gets paid time and a half. I said, are you kidding me? He goes, oh, that's not the best. If he works a holiday, he gets paid triple time. And he's pushing a broom. And he looked at me and says, do you get time and a half for holidays? Do you get paid for working weekends? I'm like, where do I sign? Sign me up. quick.
What year was that?
That was in 1977. Well, actually, it's probably late 76 because I was actually hired in 77. So put in an application, got called right away, and, took the thing and gave notice to my current job. Of course, they didn't want me to leave either, but, it was what it was. And at the time, I hadn't finished my college education, so that was kind of a stumbling block. So I started out as an hourly employee, still making $25 an hour. I mean, back in 1977, that was big, well, it's big money now too. So I started out as an hourly employee and worked for 90 days. And they kind of make you do that. That's kind of a bogey. You have to get 90 days in, or really they can let you go at any time. So 90 days. So I worked my 90 days. Immediately they put me on supervision and started as a foreman in supervision. I was a foreman for 6 months. I was promoted to a general foreman. Then I finished my college education, was promoted to an engineer, and then to a senior engineer, finally, by the time I ended my career.
So how long were you at General Motors?
32 years before I retired in 2009, but then they called me back, and I worked 2 more years on contract. So I actually got 34 years in with I want to say Hydromatic, GM Hydromatic. The plant that's called Hydromatic is gone, but they still keep that nameplate because it really means a lot in the transmission world. The Turbo Hydromatic was a very big transmission design when it was done. The plant has since closed. I was actually the one that closed it. I was the last one out. I threw my keys on the desk and turned out the lights. Saw the gate close behind me. It was really a day. But the good thing about it is that particular plant provided employment for a lot of people over a lot of years. So that old girl was really good. It was sad to see her go, but that old girl was really good for a lot of people, and that's the neat thing about it. But yeah, I was the last one out.
So for the benefit of those that aren't in the automotive industry, what exactly does a senior engineer do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I was in manufacturing engineering, which we build the process. We tell you how to put it together. And we give you machines and tooling and things like that to accomplish that job. That's pretty simple. We tell you how to build it, give you the tools to build it, and then we monitor the process as it goes through the day by day. So that's basically what an engineer does. The senior engineer is somebody that has more time or what have you. I was basically a gear expert. So when there was any technology that needed to have happen with the shape, the size, the dimensions of the gear, then they would call on me. And that's basically why I was a senior engineer. I was in gears.
So did General Motors give you specific training to advance to that?
Well, oh yeah, we had, General Motors is pretty good about their training requirements for their employees and stuff like that. So, oh yeah, they'll send you to school and seminars and any tools that you need. They do a good job of providing that. And then, of course, there are college education and engineering schools and tools as well that you have to pick up along the way. But GM is really, really good about training their employees. And then a lot of it was just the work history, too. I started in those kinds of areas, and you pick up, how the machines operate and what dimensions you need to hold and things like that. And we made a lot of gears. So a transmission is a ton of gears, and not many people know what's inside that box. But it's all made up of gears, and you can make or break a whole operation by that. So that's kind of what it is. Yeah, lots of training, sure.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Pat previously. Tell us how you met your wife, Pat.
Well, she's one gorgeous lady, and I'm very lucky that she chose me. But it's kind of funny. I told you I was in the restaurant business. I was working at Northland. She was working for Hudson's at Northland, and after the mall closes at night, everybody goes to the Chinese restaurant, and they have a bite to eat or maybe a couple of Cokes or something like that. And I was in there one night and sitting by myself at the corner of the bar, and one of Pat's girlfriends came in, and I had known her just briefly, and sat down. I was at a corner, sat down. So I was talking to her, just enjoying conversation. And up walked Pat. I didn't have any idea who she was, but she sat right directly between us. Well, my first thought was, who is this that sits between me and this other girl, you know? I thought that was kind of rude. So we conversed a little bit. And back then it was okay to be smokers. We were all smokers and stuff like that. But so Pat gets out a cigarette. And I was always brought up to be a gentleman, so I whipped out my lighter to light her cigarette. And she leaned over, and she took a hold of my hand, and she looked right straight in my eyes. And I just melted. I just knew that's the girl for me. It was absolutely love at first sight. I didn't know her name, but I knew that she was the girl for me. So I 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different times. She said no every time. She's a busy girl, you know. She had one of those schedules. But finally, did get a date with her and chased her a lot, but finally convinced her to marry me in 41 years in July of this year. So
you got married in about
72.
Okay.
Yeah, 72. And it's been absolute nothing but joy. Like I said, I thank the Lord every day that she picked me.
Well, you mentioned your daughter. We know you have a daughter and a son. Why don't you tell us about your children?
Okay. Well, as I said, Jessica was born in 70. I think it was actually 70.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. 75. She was a year. 70.
We'll go with 75.
Okay. Just maybe we can edit that one. Anyway, she's a nurse practitioner. I'm so very proud of her. She works real hard. She went through University of Michigan, got a degree in biology, then went through Wayne State Nursing School, got her master's in nursing. So she's a nurse practitioner. She's currently with the Providence system. She's in vascular surgery. When she first started, she was in the emergency setting, the cardiac emergency care. I said, how can you do that? She said, as long as I'm not working on my dad, it's okay. Okay, thank you. So anyway, she's got a great career. The doctors and things love her. Nurse practitioner is a little bit higher in the stepping stone. It's just below a doctor. She has her own license. She could have her own practice and things like that. So she's doing quite well. She works real hard, the poor thing. But she's married to a great husband, and I can tell you about her stuff too, but that's so much for Jessica. And then our son, Rick, he was born in 78. I think so. Something like that. December of 70. He's our Christmas baby. And it was kind of funny, when he was born, we had everybody over for Christmas, and Pat was bound determined she was not going to the hospital, you know, before Christmas. Everybody was at our house for Christmas dinner. And she basically just rested all day and everybody else did the work. But after everybody was gone home, you know, I said, honey, you just go to bed. I'll clean up the house and get the dishes done and everything else. So I cleaned up the house, put everything away, got all the dishes done. I think I got to bed at about 2:30. And as soon as my head hit the pillow, she sat up and she said, we got to go. And I said, come on, this isn't fair. So off we went to the hospital. Rick was born, and everything was well and stuff like that. But she was bound determined that he was not going to eat his dinner, and he didn't. So he was born the day after Christmas on the 26th. And he's graduated from Wayne State. Also, he has a degree in graphic arts. So he's the artist in the family, and currently works for me at my other occupation. We'll get to that in a second too. But he was working in sales, retail sales and stuff like that, and he's very good with people, loves working with people. He doesn't like the pressure of sales, but he's really good with people. So he's doing fantastic right now. So doing great. He's about ready to get married. He's got his fiance's name is Sarah, and their wedding is coming up here in September. So they bought a house and they're getting it ready, and the wedding's coming up and everything else. So it's a real exciting time for him. We'll back up to Jessica too, because there's a neat story with her. Her husband actually is also a Mason. And his father, Dan Beacom, lived at our Masonic home. He had Lou Gehrig's disease, MS, and he was the youngest resident to ever come to the Masonic home, and I believe he lived there the longest also. So there's a couple of things. But Danny became completely debilitated, but lived there and loved it, and the people loved him. But both his boys, Sean and Sean's brother, are both Masons. So Jessica started dating this guy, and she said, he's a Mason, Dad. Oh, good, So when he asked us for her hand in marriage, we said, well, yeah, of course. What took you so long? But anyway, they've been married 8 years now, I believe.
And as I recall, they got married at the Detroit Masonic Temple.
They did. It was a fantastic wedding. We rented the asylum, but we like to call it the chapel, because when you get married in an asylum, it's like, are you going to leave Dad there when you get married? Because that's kind of the way the thing does. But anyway, it was the Commandery Asylum, and it's just absolutely fabulous. And then we used the Crystal Ballroom for the reception. And when we were looking for places, and we went down there, I think it was only like the third or fourth place that she looked. She said, Dad, we don't need to look any further. She said, there's nothing better in town than this venue, which is absolutely true. So yeah, it was a great celebration there. And I was in line. I was senior grand warden at the time. So boy, we were pretty busy. But and they have a daughter, our other pride and joy.
I was just going to ask you.
You betcha. She'll be 3 in October. Her name is Claire Francis. She's just a pride and joy. And I told him, I says, boy, you guys are really lucky. I hope you're as lucky with the next one, because she's due in September with the next one.
Congratulations.
And it's been giving her a little trouble, but things are normal. So I told her, I said, it's probably going to be a boy, because he's kicking you around a little bit, But I said, hopefully you're going to be as lucky as you were with the first one. But,
you mentioned that Rick was working for you. So after you left General Motors, you went into a completely different field. And why don't you tell us about that?
I know. Well, I said I retired in 2009, September, actually on my birthday, in 2009. September 29th was my last day. So I had October, November, December, I had nothing to do, except sleep in and have coffee, stuff like that. So my old boss called me up and asked me if I wanted to come back to work. I said, doing what? He said, doing the exact same thing you were doing, but what they were attempting to do was transition out all the full-time employees and backfill with retirees to keep the plant running. So I said, okay, sure. So I said, well, first, what does it pay? What are you going to do for me? So he said, he gave me a number. Okay, so I went back to work in January, and I was there for 1 week, and they called me in the office, and they said, well, we've changed our mind. I said, change your mind? I haven't even been here I've only been here a week, So that didn't take long. And they said, no. We want you to be the manager of the department. Instead of being the senior engineer, we want you to take over management of the department. I said, you've got to be kidding me. He says, no. So I said, well, what does that pay? So they made me a better offer. So I said, okay. So I took over, I did that. And then about a month later, my sister calls me. Now, my sister owns a franchise, and it is a franchise for high-end dog resorts. She had talked to me years and years before about getting involved with these dog resorts. And I said, no, no, I don't have time for one. I don't have the money, because it was pretty expensive. So she said, we got an opportunity. There's a particular franchise. The guy's losing it because he's just made some wrong decisions or what have you. She said, but you can get involved in this one, for a whole lot less money than what the other one was. So I said, well, man, I just committed to General Motors that I'd work for them, to do this. She said, well, we'll see what we can do. She said, say yes first, and then we'll see what we can do. So I did. I said, okay, I'm in, what does it cost me? What do I do? So I bought this place. It's in Roseville. It's on the other side of town from where we are here. We're in Dearborn. It's in Roseville. So I bought that place. I hired a manager to work for me to manage it while I was still working at General Motors and bringing this thing along. And then put Rick in there as the assistant manager. I'd hired this one guy first, and he had a lot of skills and a lot of time with the franchise. So I needed somebody in there that really knew what they were doing. So we bought the dog. We bought the dog resort in Roseville. Holds 132 dogs. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
And what's the name of it?
It is All American Pet Resort. Thank you. All American Pet Resort. Name of the franchise. We call this one Lakeshore because of the lakeshore. It's in St. Clair Shores, right on the border. So I hired this manager to help me out, work the system, put Rick in as the assistant manager so he could kind of learn. And the manager knew that eventually he would transition away and Rick would be, of course, the heir apparent. So he was with us for about a year, and then he transitioned out. Rick took over as manager. I stayed on with General Motors another year. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just working too much. So finally, after the second year, I told GM, I said, okay, that's enough. I just can't. Enough was enough, and I was ready to stop. I mean, I was really ready to stop working. But now we have this resort, All American Pet Resort, Lakeshore, and Rick runs it for me. I'm over there once or twice, sometimes a couple weeks, every so often. But I do the paperwork and stuff like that. So I get in there to help him out, and I help him during business. He jokes around. He says, I'm hands-on, he's hands-off. So it's like, whoa, wait a minute, you know. But he's doing real well over there, and the resort's doing real well. And we're about to open a second location here in Canton, which is on this side of town from where we are here. So we're currently working with everything, getting ready to close, and hopefully that'll be open in November of this year, 2013. And everybody that's on this side of town can now bring their dogs to our resort over here.
Very good.
So yeah, I stopped one career, restarted again, then started a new one. But after this one, I think I'll really call it quits, and that'll be it.
So let's move into a different tact here. I know that you enjoy golf. Are there any other sports or hobbies that you enjoy participating in or watching?
Well, yeah, I've always been sports enthusiast. I played football, baseball, a little basketball when I was in school. Ran track and stuff like that. So I've always been involved with sports. I love the Tigers. The Lions, I'm okay with, but I think they need some help. Love hockey and that kind of stuff. I got into bass fishing, actually, because a lot of the guys were doing it at work, and one of the guys was talking to me about bass fishing, so I decided I always loved to fish, but I was one of these Sunday afternoon bobber guys, you know, with a hook and a worm and that kind of stuff. So one of the guys got me into tournament fishing. So my first tournament that I signed up for, they run with... the way they organize a tournament, they'll have a boat owner and a non-boat owner, because you can enter a tournament as a non-boat owner. At the time, I didn't own a boat. So getting ready for this tournament, you know, the guys told me what to buy, and it was all artificial. You know, use any live bait or anything like this. It's all artificial. So they told me what to buy, and I got my stuff ready and all this kind of stuff. So the day of the tournament, we're on the Asable River up north. And the day of the tournament, they draw for boats, because they go off one at a time, instead of everybody going off all at one time. For safety reasons, they go off one at a time. So the boat owner will draw the position to go off, and then the non-boat owner will draw the partner. So, okay, so I'm drawing, or the non-boat owner, the particular guy that, well, I drew a partner, and the guy that I drew was the #1 guy in the club. He was winning like all the tournaments. I'm like, oh, thank you, Lord, this is going to be my day. So I drew him. On his draw, he drew #3. So, okay, now we're the third boat out. I got the best guy. I'm in his boat. This is heaven. My first tournament. Yay! So, so we're sitting there getting ready to go. The first boat goes out. The second boat goes out. And it was at safe light, but there was just this little haze on the water. You know, just how water gets. So he takes off, and he's in a bass boat, and he tells me, before he takes off, he says, if you see something in the water, if you want me to turn, you just point. He says, don't try and talk to me, just point, and I'll go in whatever direction. I said, okay. So he hits the throttle on this this bass boat, and we take off across the water. We're doing 70 miles an hour across the water. My eyes are watering so bad I can't see anything. I'm hanging on for dear life, and I'm thinking, if there's something in the water, we're going to hit it because I can't see anything. So we're roaring across the water. And bass fishing or tournament fishing is all about covering as much water as you can as fast as you can. So he stops, all of a sudden, jumps up out of his seat, gets up the front of the boat, and he starts casting. And he's casting. When, again, in bass fishing, it's target. So you cast at a target, reel it in, maybe 18 inches, and if you haven't got a bite in that inch, you get it up and cast again. So, of course, I knew a little bit about what I was to be expected, but I had no idea what was going on here. So I get in the back of the boat, and I'm starting to cast. Okay, I got my spinning rod, and I'm throwing my lure. It's going up on the bank, and it's getting caught in the trees, and I'm yanking it back. Every once in a while, he just look over his shoulder like, who is this I got in my boat? So I had this reel, and it was what they call a level wind reel, bait caster. And I practiced with it, but I'm casting, all of a sudden, I get this big old bird's nest in the thing. Well, it's just a bird's nest is so messed up. You don't even worry about it. Just put it down, get another rod. That's why they take so many rods with them. So I picked up another rod, and it was a spinning reel, and I'm casting again. I'm throwing it up on the bank. I'm not very proficient at what I'm doing. So then finally the handle broke on my reel. It's like, oh no. So I put that one down. I pick up my last one. I had 3. Pick up my last one, and this is my best. I mean, my sweet rod and reel, my best one. So I'm casting and I'm casting. All of a sudden, splash! The pole came apart. Half of it went in the water. Yeah, and this guy's like, are you kidding me? Who's back here? So I put it back together, and I'm casting. Splash! It came apart again. Well, the ferrule had broken, so the rod wouldn't even stay together. So now all 3 of my rods and reels are broken. I'm with the best guy in the whole club. Now we're competing against each other as well, but we're in the same boat. So I was all done. I sat down in the boat. I watched him catch 17 fish and win the tournament. And I sat there. But you know what? I learned a lesson. That's one thing. You really learn a lot. So I went out the next day. I said, honey, we're going shopping. I get all new rods and reels and everything else. And now I practice and stuff like this. So in my career bass fishing, the best I ever did was 9th place. Got a nice trophy. I think I won $150, whatever. Bought a bass boat. Yeah. I get involved when I do things. But right now, then I transitioned to golf, of course, and bass fishing is I stopped tournament fishing. I still bass fish, but I stopped tournament fishing. Played golf, play golf, get involved, playing 3 or 4 times a week, shoot some low scores, and that kind of thing. So golf is probably my passion. Fishing is my hobby. So when there's time, I do them both. So yeah, and then I like watching sports and stuff like that. So.
Tell us about any memberships that you have in other organizations outside the Masonic fraternity or any involvement in community organizations.
Okay, well, Pat and I have always been involved with the PTAs and things like that. Mm-hmm. When our kids were growing up, we were very involved with them, and then the local PTAs as well as the individuals. So we were always really involved in that. She stayed involved and was on the school board for a number of years. And then I was involved with the city and the planning commission, things like that on the planning commission. They wanted me to run for city office, and I said, no, that's way too much. But that was basically my outside involvement. The schools, we really kept involved with the schools and the kids. Even when our kids were gone, we stayed involved.
So how did you first learn of the Masonic fraternity?
Oh, well, that's another story. Do we have enough tape? I hope so. It was kind of funny because my in-laws bought a place in Arizona. So every year they would drive from Detroit to Arizona, and then from Arizona back to Detroit. So what they would do, they bought a motorhome. Well, when my mother-in-law got where she couldn't travel in the motorhome for that length of time, one of the kids in the family would fly down there. So we would fly down there and drive the motorhome back from Arizona, and vice versa, from Detroit to Arizona, and then fly home. And we'd fly back on the other half of Mom's ticket, and we could still kind of do that, She'd buy a round-trip ticket and fly one way, and we'd fly back the other way. So anyway, so one year was my year to go bring the motorhome back with Dad. So we went to Arizona, and he said, I got to make a stop in Phoenix. He was a radio operator for the Shrine. So he said, there's a big parade, in Phoenix and through the Shrine. I gotta do this. And I had known that he was a Mason. Finally figured out that he wasn't a bricklayer because I didn't know anything about the fraternity at all. I never been afforded any aspect of the fraternity prior to meeting him. So I knew a little bit about what it was, but not much, because he wouldn't talk about it, as many of us and many of our fathers never would. So anyway, so we went to Phoenix and parked in his parking lot, and he got his Shrine fez on, his regalia and stuff, and I was standing on the street corner with him, and he's directing traffic with his thing, and this parade's going by. So he starts telling me about this parade, and it was a Shrine parade, and in these cars and on these floats were all of these children that they had helped. I was just amazed at what this organization was doing, and had no idea that there was any organization out there that helped children like the Shrine does. So that's when I said, how do I do this? And he said, well, you already did. I said, no, you don't understand. How do I get involved? He goes, no, you don't understand. You just did. So so he said, I'll get you set up. So we got back here, and he was a member of Trinity Lodge that met in the Detroit Masonic Temple. His father, also Ray Cusac, was one of the founding members of that temple when it was built. He was president of the Temple Association and everything else. So he's had quite a history with the Detroit Masonic Temple. But anyway, so he was a member downtown, and he thought, there's no way that Rick is going to be active and go downtown. We lived out in the suburb, and so he was very good friends with Bob Osborne, who was Grand Secretary at the time. Isa May, his wife, and Bob were very active with the Scottish Rite in the Players Club. And my father-in-law and my mother-in-law, Fran and Earl, they did makeup for the Players Club. So they were really good friends with Bob and Isa May. So he called their house to find out where he should send me. And so Bob wasn't home, and he talked to Isa May. And bless her heart, she said, well, if he wants to be really active, he lives right around the corner from Wayne Lodge. She said, send him over to Wayne Lodge. So, okay. So he called the people at Wayne Lodge, got a petition, and I turned it in. Well, I turned it in. I didn't hear anything. It was quiet, Nobody ever called me, no nothing. So I called him up. I said, hey, I guess they don't want me. I haven't heard a whisper. So he called Bob. This time he got a hold of Bob. And it wasn't more than about a week later, Pat and I are sitting on our front porch, and a guy comes rolling up in a bright red Ford pickup truck. I worked for GM, so I was like, what's this guy doing? Who is he? And little short guy comes bebopping up my front sidewalk, and he says, are you Rick? And I said, yes. And he goes, I'm Donnie McGregor. I'm the worshipful master of Wayne Lodge. And he sticks out his hand, He's a great guy. And he says, I understand you want to join our lodge, So that was how I got introduced to Masonry, basically. If it was with Bob Osborne and his lovely wife, Isa May.
So what year was that?
That was in 1971, in the summer of 1971. And it was kind of funny because I got my EA degree. Wayne Lodge is very, very busy. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know. But I got my EA degree, and then again, I didn't hear a whisper because I got my EA in October. Well, November and December in Masonic lodges, as you well know, they don't do much degree work because there's installations and with the holidays and stuff like that. So here I'd gotten my EA, and nobody called me. Nobody said a word. I had no idea what was going on. So I told my father-in-law, He goes, Bob, I was born again. They were probably wondering, who the heck have we got our hands on here, you know? So right after that, boy, I got my fellow craft, got my Master Mason in April. And Wayne Lodge has a Master Mason at the end of every month. As I said, they're fortunate, they're very busy. And they give the candidates time to talk, you know. So I'm not very shy with microphones and things like that, you may have noticed. So they gave me the microphone to talk. So I was talking about how it was a very enjoyable experience with me, and I was glad that I was here and stuff like that, you know. And then I think it was actually the senior warden shouted out something like, "Make him an officer!" Something like that. So that was about how I got involved.
So you became an officer, you went on, you became Worshipful Master.
I did.
What year were you Worshipful Master?
Well, I became an officer in 92. Well, I was installed in 92. And then I actually had a heart attack, so I was away. But I was an officer. I was just a junior steward. But here I'm laying in the hospital at St. Joe's, and in pops this old guy with a Mason hat on, you know, Masonic hat on, square and compass. I didn't even know his name. And his name was Neil Priestcorn. And he said, "I saw your name on the door out there. I knew you were one of us, so I thought I'd stop by." I was just astounded. I had no idea who he was, but he knew me. Stopped in to see me at the hospital. So anyway, so yes, I worked my way through the chairs. I was Worshipful Master in 1999. And
tell us about some memories of that year. What were some of the highlights of your year as Master?
You know, it was fantastic. Wayne Lodge is a very large lodge. They were still, as many lodges were back in the early 90s, you know, working themselves out of or into the limelight. But I was a little disturbed, actually, because a lot of cigarette smoking, guys playing cards. And actually, when I walked in, nobody greeted me. I stood alone. I was quite disappointed. I thought, this isn't at all what I expected. But we had a senior warden, or a senior deacon. His name is Larry Holland. Larry Holland came to me, put his arm around me, and he never left my side after that. And he was one of my mentors there in that lodge. Introduced me to everybody. Of course, they were playing cards. Yeah, hi. You know, one of these things. And I'm like, oh, jeepers. I don't want to breathe a cigarette smoke or anything. And one of the guys that also was my mentor, Art Latz, you know Art Latz, Worship Brother Art Latz. He actually was the master when I was raised. He said, don't worry about him. He said, they'll quit smoking one of these years and we'll be okay. You know, just stay away from the smoke. Well, with my health conditions, I couldn't be there anyway. But Larry Holland mentored me through the chairs. And I'll never forget, I wanted to put a sign up. We didn't have a sign in Westland like these round signs that are at the entrances, you know, the community signs that the chamber puts up. So one night in lodge, I asked, you know, if I could put up a sign. I said, will you buy it if I promise to put it up, you know? Everybody was like, yeah, sure, anything you want. They called me the snotty-nosed college kid, right? He wants to change the whole world, you know? But then I had one of the old past masters. He said, you keep doing what you're doing because we need you. So I knew that, you know, things were right. I've always been pretty progressive. And I always used to ask a lot of questions, even if I knew the answers, because I loved hearing the older guys in lodge. I liked hearing their history. I liked hearing them talk about the old ways, you know, how things were, or their experiences, you know. So they became used to me, the snotty-nosed college kid. And then one of them on his dying bed said, you know, you be careful because we need you. So Sam Favors was his name. You'd think he was sleeping, but if you said the wrong word, he'd know it immediately. He'd come back up to you, you know, says, there ain't no feet, buddy. Okay. But he's sleeping in the corner. You'd think he was asleep, but he knew every word.
So you went on and joined some of the appendant and affiliated organizations. Tell me about some of the ones that you belong to.
Okay. Well, I am Scottish Rite Mason right here at this facility. Boy, when did I join Scottish Rite? It was early, 91 maybe or something like that. So I'm fairly young Mason anyway. Pretty much right away I joined the Scottish Rite, joined the York Rite. We have a York Rite chapter at our lodge. It's very active, so it was easy, to join with them. That's Wayne chapter. This valley here as well, so close. Commandery, Northville Commandery, Northville Council, Allied Masonic Degrees, of course all the youth organizations, and that's one of the things I'm real proud of, the awards from them and things like that. But the Masonic affiliated things, I'm a Shriner as well, I'm a gesture. I love the Shrine, love the things that the Shrine does with the kids and things like that. I haven't been as active as that I want to be, and that's one of my goals, is to get active. I want to driver, maybe drive to the hospitals and stuff like that. I've had a couple of kids that I sent to the Shrine for help and stuff like that. But I'm the secretary of our York Rite chapter. I'm the secretary of the Masonic Temple Association there at Wayne Lodge. I'm the secretary from Wayne Lodge. So I must be good at taking notes or something, So.
Let's talk about that a minute. You became the secretary of the lodge after you served as Grand Master.
I did.
How did that come about, and how is the experience of being the secretary different than being like Master of the Lodge?
Well, our old secretary, bless his soul, Walter Hutchins, he had been secretary for 34 years. And that lodge, when I joined, they had over 1,200 members. And bless his heart, he did it all by hand. He didn't have any computers, kept all the records straight, stuff like that. Walter got real sick while I was master. Before, he had cancer, and he was getting worse and worse and worse. And I went into Grand Lodge, and I told him when I got out that I would take over for him. Unfortunately, Walter died 2 weeks before I was installed as Grand Master. But I told him that I would take over for him. So Worshipful Brother Roy Watts took over as secretary and was secretary while I was Grand Master. And then when I came out, and then Roy, stepped down, and I took over as secretary. I'm very active with the lodge, but I try very, very hard. I think I do a pretty good job of it, of not running the lodge. Because the old saying, the secretaries run the lodge, I try very, very hard not to do that. I always push things to the Worshipful Master, although I tell him, I'm there for you, I'm there to support you, I'll do anything you ask me to do, but I don't want to step in and do it for you. I don't want to run the lodge. That's your job. That's your joy, is to run the lodge. And I want them to have that enjoyment. I know just from the positional power that the perception of that kind of thing, it's easy. And guys do come to me all the time wanting, this, that, or advice or whatever. And for the most part, I always try, and if I can, to send them to the Worshipful Master. But it's difficult. It's very difficult. But I think I'm doing a good job. They keep electing me, so.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Over the years, I know that you've received many honors and awards. Tell us about a couple that are the most meaningful or had the most impact on you when you got them.
Well, Masonic awards are very, very meaningful and have I've gotten a lot of awards. As I said, they do mean a lot. But I'll tell you, the awards I've gotten from the youth groups are very special to me. I did receive the Chevalier from the DMLA, and I wasn't a DMLA.
Legion of Honor.
Or excuse me, the Legion of Honor. Yeah, not the Chevalier. The Legion of Honor. It's an honorary degree. And that, from the boys, from the young men, to give you that honor, it's almost indescribable. It's so nice. And then from the young ladies, the Job's Daughter, the Triangle of Honor, and then of course the Grand Cross from Rainbow. For the kids to honor you like that, it's just amazing. And I work a lot with them still. Although, I'm an old guy, but I think they still like having me around. and I like being around them, and you get a lot of satisfaction. It gives the youth back to you as well. But I really, really enjoy being with the youth. We're fortunate at Wayne Masonic Temple to have our own rainbow assembly, and it's growing, and we have fun. We've tried to get the DMLA back there, because we did have a big DMLA chapter. And one time we had boys and we didn't have advisors, and then we had advisors and we didn't have boys. We just can't get it quite back together to get the DMLA back. We've never had a Bethel from the Job's Daughters, and the one nearest us is quite far away, so I really haven't been able to get involved with the Job's Daughters. But the youth awards are very, very meaningful. I think, you know, for them to recognize you as a leader to help them, and for their continual recognition, instead of just saying, well, yeah, it's a flash in the pan, you did it because he was Grand Master or whatever, you know. For that recognition is really special. Of course, awards from your peers in Masonry are also very special. And I've received many of them, and I'm very thankful for them. So I just try to give back as much as I can all the time. Just keep giving back.
Very good. Tell us about some of your Masonic mentors. You mentioned a couple of them earlier, Art Latz and a few others. Who were some of your Masonic mentors?
I did. Art Latz, he was there when I was raised. My father-in-law came in to raise me. I didn't even know he was there until I was blindfolded and heard his voice. But Art mentored me throughout the first year. My ritualist mentor was Shelby Short. He's also a past master from Wayne Lodge. He passed away, gosh, maybe 5 years ago now. But Shelby was an outstanding ritualist. Larry Holland, our senior deacon, a master ritualist, helped me through there. Sam Favors whispered in my ear a few times, you know.
What about Grand Lodge?
Grand Lodge, I got to say, you know, of course, Bob Osborne. I counseled with him many times when I was growing up through the Grand Line about how to do things, what to do, when to do it, things like that. Bless his heart, Bob Sanborn. I just have so much respect to Most Worshipful Brother Bob. And even Dick Sands. These are all Most Worshipful Brothers, and they are so deserving of that term, of that, you know. Dick is just an amazed, not only a worldly scholar, but a Masonic scholar. I learned a lot from Dick. He really taught me the benefit. I told you earlier I'm a history buff. He really taught me the benefit of the history behind our organization, and teaching that and keeping that history alive. So, you know, these three especially, you know, even Bob Conley, I consider him a good friend. He said some things at my reception. He said that I would be a great Grand Master, and I was just amazed. I'm choked up about it. He, you know, and just from the times that we've met and counseled, you know, he's a great man, most worshipful brother. And they all do. You do as well. You know, Walt, you and I have talked many times before. You took out all the deer ahead of me as we were campaigning. I thank you for that. I think you hit 7 or 9 of them or something like that.
Just 3.
Just 3.
But tell me about some of the other, outside of your mentors, some of the other Grand Masters that you've known prior to your time in the Grand Line. You've mentioned, obviously, Bob Osborne and Dick Sands. And,
well, you know, prior to my time in the Grand Line, I really didn't even know what a Grand Master did. I had no idea. The fraternity is so new to me. Like I said, I didn't have the benefit when I was growing up. I really started when I was, you know, 1991, when I started getting involved to figure out what's it all about. You know, I started going to Grand Lodges to try and figure out what that was all about, realized the hierarchy in there, and started to meet those great men during that term. So before that, well, I had no idea what it was about.
What was your first Grand Lodge? What year?
Well, let's see. The Grand Master was, it was Dale Edwards right here in Dearborn. So was that
95?
95, yeah. Right here in Dearborn.
Very good.
And I'm their wide-eyed kid, like, what the heck is going on? I had no idea. Can I talk now? No! Put your hand down. Okay, I'm sorry.
So, and not having that extensive background or interaction with Grand Lodge, what made you decide to run for Grand Lodge?
Well, yeah, I was involved with the Masonic organization here in town. It's called the MMA, which is the Michigan Masonic Association, MMA. And what they do here, they've been alive since like 1905, but it was an organization of lodges in town to help Masons. They would actually help Masons find jobs and find work and employment and all that kind of stuff. So I got involved with the MMA when I was senior warden, the senior warden circuit to go around town. They teach you how to be a leader, how to speak in front of a microphone and things like that. I was president of the MMA when I was Worshipful Master. I met Worship Brother David Bedwell and some of those guys and got to know them quite well. Became friends with David, and one day when I was Master, David showed up at my lodge, and which is quite different. He was Grand Lodge officer at the time. And, just greeted us, had fun, whatever. And when Lodge was over, he wanted to buy me a coffee. So he told me that Grand Lodge needed me. He didn't say, I want you to do this, or you need to do this. He said, your Grand Lodge needs you. Needs me to do what? Well, we need you to become an officer. You have the skills that we need. I have the management skills with General Motors, and you have the Masonic skills. You've proven your leadership, and we need that kind of leadership. So I said, let me talk to Pat and see what she says. I said, what kind of commitment is this? He goes, well, it's another 7 years. And so I said, well, let me talk to Pat and see what she has to say. So I did. I went home, talked to Pat. I said, you'll never guess who came to Lodge tonight. She says, you're right, I never will. So I told her it was Dave. And she said, well, if you want to do it, I support you 100%. So I called Dave the next day. I said, okay, now what do I do? So he basically told me what to do, and I did that. I traveled all around the state and got introduced myself to the guys and introduced my credentials and that kind of thing as to what it was, and the rest is kind of history. I was elected and went on. We were elected, and I got more votes than you did. Put that on camera. I got more votes than Walt. Yeah. So I was junior Grand Deacon, and you were Grand Marshal, and we grew up from there.
We did. As you progressed through the Grand Lodge line, and even when you became Grand Master, what were some of the things that surprised you?
Well, I guess initially I was surprised at how big the Grand Lodge is. I had no idea the amount of wealth and that kind of thing that we had until I really started to get involved. So I didn't realize how big it was. I knew it was like a big company, lots of employees, so to speak, with the membership and things like that. But I didn't really comprehend the magnitude of how large the fraternity is, how widespread the fraternity is, how much clout that Michigan has as a fraternity, among the other states and world and stuff like that. So I was pretty amazed that Michigan is very well known. Although, the more I learned, it didn't surprise me because of the great men that have come before me. So I was surprised, but then I understood, okay, now I really understand why. Because we have had a number of everyone behind me has been an absolute great leader. And the world knows that. So that was kind of a surprise, but then it was kind of a revelation. It's like, oh, okay, no wonder. Now I see that. So,
let's talk a little bit about your year as Grand Master.
Yeah.
What were some of the highlights?
Well, I would have continued, actually, too. I was tired when I finished, but I would have continued because it's so gratifying. The people that you meet, the Masons that you meet, the places you go, the friendships that you acquire. It's just a fantastic opportunity, especially in the state of Michigan. I've seen places in the state of Michigan I had no idea existed. And the people are just so thankful that you're there. It's like, oh, it's okay, you know, it's okay. But the fraternity is just absolutely wonderful. And that's probably the highlight. You know, of course, there's management decisions you have to make, and there's some that are pretty tough. Some of them involve individuals and their lives and things like that. But that's part of business as well, you know. We moved the Grand Lodge office to its current location in Alma, which I think was a huge accomplishment. That is our crown jewel up there, so why not? And now the office is there as another part of our crown jewel, so that was a huge accomplishment. We dedicated the wing of the Masonic home to Dr. Sanders, who had been there at the Masonic home for so long and helped so many people. He was just a very, very great man as well.
He was at the dedication.
He was, yeah. So we dedicated that wing, so that was special. Dedicated a lot of Masonic lodges, did some sesquicentennials, some centennials. Let's see. I was present actually in Washington, D.C. when they constituted a new lodge. So I was present there in Washington, D.C. We constituted a new lodge here too. Almost forgot about Acacia Lodge, number 7. We constituted that lodge too. So our Grand Line signed that charter. We did their installation and things like that. So that was, not many Grand Masters have that opportunity as well. So those were pretty neat things. But the friendships all around the state, and they're so lasting. It's a great thing. Like I said, I had so much fun. I would have continued, although I was really tired. I was working full time during that time, so I kept 3 changes of clothes in the car. I drove the wheels off 2 vehicles. You know, I'd leave from work. I had flexible hours plus 6-7 weeks vacation. Plus, I was a kind of an employee you really didn't need to worry about. I mean, I got the job done as well, so my boss knew what was going on, and they were very, you know, helpful there. I'd leave work and drive someplace, you know, 3 hours away and come back. And I had some guys from the lodge, Bernie Brewer and Roger Moore, who drove me a lot, both past masters of Wayne Lodge, and they'd drive me, so they'd pick me up. I just leave my car. And sometimes we'd spend the night in a hotel, and then they'd drive me back to work the next day. So I had a lot of people that would help me do that. And as I said, General Motors was real good in that aspect, and lots of vacations. So I didn't watch much TV. You know, Pat went with me, traveled with me as much as we could as well. So it's a great experience for both of us. But meeting the people and enjoying that kind of thing, and of course, there's minutia about the business, and you got to take care of that. That's all. You got to take care of the business. So. Other than that, that's probably the highlight. And
actually, being a Scottish Rite person, you also had the honor of being the host Grand Master when the Scottish Rite Supreme Council was in Michigan.
That's right. The Supreme Council was here. And that was kind of funny because I'd ask past Grand Master Doug Hagee, I counseled with him a lot too, like, okay, what do I do now? Where do I go? Where do I sit? You know? He goes, well, you know, big guy, you sit right there. You know? So that was pretty cool. But
it's very special for the host Grand Master.
It was. That was fantastic. Oh, yeah. We had that. Yep. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah. Tell us, what do you think the fraternity needs to do to grow and prosper?
Well, I think we're on the right track, but continue to, I think we need to continue to give some historical background. Not only current history, but previous history. We find a lot of guys now with the internet and things like that, they're doing a lot of homework before they join. But as we know, you can't believe everything you read on the internet or the newspaper or what have you. So I think it's our responsibility to provide that, not only for new people that want to join, but for young and current members that are here. We need to provide them with the historical information, current and previous, so that they can grow as a person as well. If we don't provide that, then they're going to forget about what it was, or not ever know how the fraternity was. And the fraternities could change very rapidly in directions that possibly we don't want it to go. So I think the historical aspect is, and the community involvement are probably the two that we need to really continue to stress. When I speak about community involvement, we'll toot our horn here a little bit for Wayne Lodge, but we recently just adopted a community park. And we had noticed that it was another organization in town that was a sponsor of the park, but that organization doesn't exist anymore. So it was only natural for somebody. So our junior warden, Bud Pro, got involved with the Recreation Commission, found out that, and came to the city council, proposed that we take over sponsorship. So now our name is on the sign at this beautiful park in town. There's not a whole lot of liability that we have for it, but some responsibility. But now our name's there on the community. We had a big write-up in the newspaper and things like that. Well, people see this, and they think they know what a Mason is, so they go, oh yeah, that's the Masons. Well, okay, well the Masons are involved in this park. And oh yeah, the Masons are involved with this Little League. And oh yeah, the Masons are involved in the... Oh, well, who are these Masons? You know, people begin to involve. So at that point in time, it's our duty to then tell them who we really are. And as I said earlier, you know, our dads and our grandfathers, they didn't talk about it. So it was very difficult for sons to even understand who to ask, or even to ask, because their dad wouldn't talk. So now it's our turn to somewhat come out and talk about the fraternity, and we're doing that. And we've got a great program to do that. But then once they come to us, we have to find out, number one, what they're looking for, and provide those kinds of programs. Most of the guys that I see right now are looking for community involvement. And of course, we provide family involvement too, but most of them now are looking about what can I give back to my community or my country or something like that. And our fraternity, you know, provides a lot of that.
It does.
Yeah.
What advice would you give somebody that came to you and said, I'm thinking about becoming a Mason? What would you tell them?
Becoming a Mason? Okay, well, that's easy. I'd say, come on, that's good. That's a good thing. I would do that. I'd first give him some history. And I used to do that when I was the senior deacon. The senior deacon in our lodge is responsible for all the candidates. I'd bring him to the lodge, and I would open up every single solitary door in the whole lodge to him and his family. And I would tell him, I'll answer any question you have. I don't care what it is you ask me, I'll answer it. And I'd open the doors so that they could see, number one, that there's no dancing girls, there's no bars, you know, any of this weird kind of poles that we roll out at night, you know, flamethrowers or what have you. So they open up all the doors and closets. And then I tell them, ask me any question you want, you know. Well, they don't know the correct questions to ask anyway, so I really wasn't worried. But most of the time, they want to know what that G is for, you know. So you explain to them what the G is for: geometry and God. Do things that we really believe in. And I find that works really well to set the women and the family at ease, because the man is not going to prosper in Masonry unless the family is comfortable with it. You know, we have working parents. Wife comes home from work and he says, okay, see you, honey, I'm going to lodge. She goes, oh, no, you're not. You know, these babies need you or whatever. So that's what I try to tell them. That's what I try to explain to them. And I explain to them there's lots of ways that they can learn, they can lead, they can be led. There's all kinds of things that we can help them in their life, in their family, their job, all kinds of opportunities, as well as just having some men friends. When I joined, I didn't have any men friends. I had friends that were couples. You know, we were friends because we were couples, but I didn't have any men friends. You know, I mean, now we're all couples anyway, but I have friends that are men friends. You know, friends because we're friends with each other, not because our wives are friends with each other. So that helps a lot of guys that join the fraternity as well, too. So.
What would you tell somebody that came to you and asked for some advice because they were going to be Worshipful Master for the first time?
I'd tell them to run like heck. No. a lot of guys recently in our lodge are also young Masons that have become Worshipful Master. And I have had time to talk with them just about that. And I tell them, number one, learn your lessons and learn what it means. Not only just learn to say the words, but learn what those words mean. Because people will ask you when you're the master, and you will be responsible. Again, we're going to teach you how to learn. We're going to allow you to learn. We're going to allow you to lead. And when you lead, people are going to want to know, what does that mean? Why do we say that? Why do we say it at that particular time? Because a lot of our ritual is Old English, and people don't speak that kind of language anymore. So, and I tell them to have fun, because it is a fun experience. There is some management involved too, and depending on the size of the lodge, it could be different things that are involved with. But to try to have fun, because it's a lot of fun. It's supposed to be an enjoyable year for you. That's kind of what I tell them.
Along those same lines, what would you tell somebody that came to you and said, I'm thinking about running for Grand Lodge?
Now then I would tell them to run the opposite direction. No. Similar kinds of advice. Learn what it's about, because it is a huge responsibility. I try to tell them the things that were aha moments for me. It's a huge corporation, and you're going to be the CEO of this corporation. You're going to have 37,000 employees, which equates to members. People are going to ask you for advice all the time. Be careful with your advice. Think about your remarks. That kind of thing. Take it slow, and then also enjoy your time, because it is also a very, very enjoyable time. But I try to give them some of those things that I didn't know, especially the corporate things. If they don't come from a corporate world, they're going to be expected to know and to be able to make some decisions. If you can't make those decisions, surround yourself with people that you know that you can trust, that will help you and give you some advice for those decisions. So that's kind of the same thing you do in a corporate world anyway. Surround yourself with people that know what to do.
How has Masonry impacted your life?
Well, I wear different ties now. I wear different jewelry. No. It's definitely changed my life. It's changed the way I look at people maybe that are not, that are less fortunate as us. The way I can help my community more, especially the way I can help kids. I work a lot with underprivileged kids as well. Gotten deeply involved in some of the programs we have at the Grand Lodge, where we help kids. Obviously the child identification program, the program for reading, do a lot of that kind of stuff. It's helped me. It's helped kind of bring me back to the community and somewhat to reality, and kind of leveled me out a little bit. Yeah.
Very good. Any final reflections on the fraternity or your Grand Lodge?
Final reflections. That means you're running out of tape, huh? Well, I'll tell you what. This is undoubtedly the finest organization on the face of the earth. We combine everything in one. You'll have some organizations that do community. You have some organizations that have bars and have social and things like that. We really combine everything in a man's life, where you can work with your family, you can work with youth, you can work with your community, you can improve yourself. Everything is in this community. It is rolled up in this fraternity. And it's probably why it's lasted so long, is because we do have a complete package here for the man that wants to improve himself, and have a good time doing it. Because we do have a lot of really good fellowship. Our friendships are forever. We have bonds that are just unbreakable. So it's just a amazing fraternity when you get active. You can stay on the outside and do what you need to do. Your level of involvement can be at any different heights or directions. But when you immerse yourself into here and you get involved with the people and the rest of your peers and things like that, it really does round out your life. It really does.
I agree. Rick, thank you very much for being with us today and being part of our Legacy series.
Thank you. Thank you very much.